The first lie I told at Myeongseong Royal University was that the bus had made me late. The truth was that my driver had dropped me 3 streets away, and I had spent 10 minutes rubbing dust on a shoes worth more than most students' tuition. I walked through the front gate carrying a faded backpack, a cracked phone, and exactly 30,000 won in cash. Nobody there knew Han Seojun, heir to Hanul Vertex Group, had arrived pretending to be poor. I had not chosen the disguise because I hated money. I chose it because money had ruined every friendship I had ever touched. Classmates laughed before I finished jokes, strangers remembered my birthday after reading business magazines, and people who called me brother vanished whenever my father's office stopped paying. My grandmother believed wealth did not make people fake. It simply made honesty too expensive for them to risk. Before she died, Grandmother Manhwa left me the Common Ground Protocol, a private system connected to the family trust. It placed 90% of my assets behind a digital lock and gave me 1 semester to form 3 genuine relationships without revealing my identity. I could live on 300,000 won a month, accept no family favors, and use system funds only when another person's safety was at risk. If I failed, control of my inheritance would pass to the corporate board. My father called the test sentimental nonsense. He said a future chairman did not need friends. He needed loyal employees, careful lawyers, and enough shares to survive betrayal. I told him that sounded like a very expensive way to die alone. He stopped arguing after that, but his secretary, Kim Yerin, handed me the cracked phone and warned me the system would record every secret purchase, lie, and manipulation. Myeongseong Royal was the perfect place for the test because nobody expected its poorest students to matter. The campus belonged, unofficially, to the Kong family. They funded the business school, appointed trustees, controlled half the student council, and treated Principal Park Dae-sik like an employee wearing academic robes. Their youngest son, Kang Tae-jun, had already appeared on 3 campus banners before attending his first lecture. I met Tae-jun before I found my classroom. He stepped out of a silver sports car while students gathered around him like metal filings around a magnet. Someone noticed me crossing the valet lane and shouted that delivery workers used the side entrance. Tae-jun looked me over, saw the cheap uniform I had purchased secondhand, and told security not to be cruel. Then he suggested they escort me to the scholarship office before I embarrassed myself. I thanked him and kept walking. His friends laughed because they thought I had not understood the insult. My phone vibrated once. The Common Ground Protocol displayed no reward, only a note. Social hierarchy mapped. Subject Kang Tae-jun values obedience over kindness. I had expected the system to judge my friends. I had not expected it to analyze the people trying to become my enemies. My first lecture was Introduction to Corporate Ethics, which felt like the universe making fun of me. Professor Imura asked why companies created codes of conduct. Tae-jun answered that rules protected reputation. A scholarship student near the window said rules protected people without power. Half the room ignored her. I did not. Her name was Yoon Min-seo, and she spoke without raising her voice, as if she had already learned that truth became easier to dismiss when delivered emotionally. Professor M asked me next. I said rules were most important when breaking them became profitable. Tae-jun turned around, surprised the poor-looking stranger could form a complete sentence. Min-seo hid a smile. The system marked 2 responses. Intellectual respect detected from Yoon Min-seo, competitive hostility detected from Kang Tae-jun. Neither counted as friendship, but one felt warmer than every conversation I had endured at private academies. After class, I discovered my dorm assignment had been canceled because the scholarship office had not received a housing deposit. That was impossible. The Common Ground Protocol had paid every approved fee through a blind trust that concealed my identity. The clerk barely looked at the receipt before saying system errors happen more often to low-income students. She suggested I sleep at a bathhouse until the review finished. A tall boy with round glasses overheard us while fixing the office printer. He introduced himself as Park Jun-ho, computer science major, part-time technician, and victim of what he called Myeongseong's administrative black hole. He opened the housing portal, found my payment, and showed the clerk that someone had manually changed my status from confirmed to incomplete. The clerk suddenly became very interested in closing her screen. Jun-ho restored the record before anyone could stop him. The clerk warned that unauthorized access could cost him his job. He replied that clicking the correct student file was not hacking unless incompetence had become a security feature. I laughed harder than the joke deserved. The system recorded spontaneous assistance without expected benefit. Trust candidate 1 identified. Probability of sincerity, 63%. Junho did not ask where I came from or why my deposit had arrived through a private trust. He asked whether I played strategy games and whether I snored. When I said no to both, he told me the second answer was probably a lie and offered to help carry my bag. Nobody had ever offered me something that ordinary without first calculating what my surname could return. Our dorm room was half the size of my old dressing room. Junho's desk was covered in circuit boards, instant noodle cups, and a tiny cactus wearing paper sunglasses. My bed frame squeaked whenever I breathed. The window faced the laundry building instead of the river. I expected discomfort. What surprised me was relief. Nothing in that room had been selected to impress investors. That evening, Junho took me to the cheapest cafeteria line on campus. He explained which soup was mostly water, which side dishes appeared again the next day, and which cashier sometimes added an extra egg if students looked exhausted enough. The cashier was Mincio. She recognized me from class and asked whether I always answered professors like I was cross-examining them. I told her only professors who assigned 50 pages before lunch. She slid an extra dumpling onto my tray and charged nothing. The system immediately warned me that accepting unrecorded benefits violated the poverty test budget. I started to return it, but Mincio said the dumpling was cracked and could not be sold anyway. Her expression told me she knew exactly how to preserve someone's pride while helping them. At the table, Junho revealed that Mincio worked 3 jobs despite holding a full scholarship. The scholarship covered tuition, but Myong Seong charged separate technology, leadership, facility, alumni, security, and opportunity fees. I thought opportunity fee was a joke. It was not. Students paid for access to recruitment events already funded by corporate sponsors. My family foundation had donated to those events for years. The system opened a hidden ledger and compared the college's public budget with its student charges. Several numbers did not match. I had come to Myong Seong to test friendship, not investigate accounting fraud. Still, grandmother had built the protocol to notice exploitation. A new line appeared beneath my trust mission. Institutional anomaly detected. Friendship test may intersect with active financial harm. I almost contacted Yaren that night, but doing so without an emergency would violate the rules. More importantly, I wanted to know whether the discrepancy was corruption or ordinary administrative greed. Rich people often called theft complicated when enough forms were involved. I decided to observe. Junho thought I was staring at my phone because I missed home. He offered me half his instant noodles without asking questions. The next morning, Taejun announced his campaign for student council president. His platform promised excellence, security, and stronger partnerships with elite companies. Mincio whispered that every promise sounded like a polite way to remove poor students from visible places. Taejun's campaign volunteers distributed expensive coffee to everyone except the cafeteria staff. When he saw me beside Mincio, he asked whether she had started collecting abandoned things. Mincio answered before I could. She said abandoned things were often more useful than inherited ones. Taejun's friends went silent. I expected him to attack her, but he smiled and told her scholarship renewals could become complicated for students who misunderstood gratitude. The threat was soft enough to deny and clear enough to frighten. The system flagged coercion linked to scholarship administration. I asked Mincio whether Taejun controlled renewals. She said his family controlled the Myong Seong Future Foundation, which reviewed students for leadership suitability. Grades were only half the decision. Students also received private conduct scores based on faculty recommendations, event participation, donor feedback, and something called institutional harmony. Nobody knew how the score was calculated, but students who criticized the Kong family often lost aid. Junho called it social credit with better fonts. He had once tried to inspect the scoring portal and received a formal warning within an hour. His campus job hours were cut the following week. Mincio's friend had lost housing after organizing cafeteria workers. The system added another anomaly. Hidden behavioral scoring may be tied to financial aid. Estimated affected students, 412. That number changed the meaning of my test. I had enough hidden wealth to pay every student's fees before breakfast, but the protocol would not let me solve structural problems with personal charity. Grandmother's final note said money could rescue a person while preserving the machine that injured them. If I wanted access to system funds, I needed evidence, consent from those affected, and a solution that did not depend on my mood. I hated rules until I remembered how many rich men called impulse generosity. So I stayed poor and started listening. Mincio introduced me to students who had lost scholarships for strange reasons. One had missed a donor dinner while caring for his father. Another had posted criticism of campus security. A third had rejected an unpaid internship at a Kong subsidiary. Their grades remained excellent. Their harmony scores collapsed. The student paper had tried to investigate, but its editor killed the article. The reporter who gathered the documents was Choi Hannah, a sharp-eyed journalism major with a voice that made excuses feel guilty. She met us behind the library and assumed I was Junho's new coding assistant. When he told her I had noticed budget mismatches, she looked at me like a stray dog that had unexpectedly learned accounting. Hannah carried 3 flash drives on a chain around her neck because the paper's shared drive had been wiped twice. She did not trust administrators, student leaders, or cloud storage. She trusted timestamps. When I asked why she had not quit, she said somebody had to remember what powerful people edited out. The system marked her as Trust Candidate 2, Sincerity Probability, 58%. Hannah refused to share her full archive until I proved I was not working for Taejun. Her test was simple. I had to attend a scholarship networking reception and record which donors asked students about family debt. I thought she was joking. She was not. Debt information was not part of any official mentoring program, but Kong recruiters seemed unusually interested in students with sick parents, overdue rent, or younger siblings. The reception took place in a hotel ballroom where I had once attended a Vertex board dinner. I wore a borrowed jacket from Junho that was too short at the wrists. Nobody recognized me because wealthy people rarely study the faces of heirs until cameras tell them to. Taejun stood near the stage, introducing scholarship students to Kong executives as if arranging products on shelves. I watched recruiters ask innocent questions about financial pressure, work availability, and willingness to relocate without notice. Students with the most desperate answers received gold stickers on their name tags. Mincio received one after mentioning her mother's hospital bills. She thought it meant priority consideration. The system identified the sticker code as high compliance candidate. My stomach turned. A Kong executive approached me and asked what my parents did. I said my father worked in logistics, which was technically true if controlling an international shipping network counted. The executive asked whether my family had debt. I said enough to understand interest. He placed a silver sticker on my badge and moved away. The system translated it: low-value candidate, moderate resistance risk. For the first time in my life, being underestimated gave me access instead of pain. I followed a staff member carrying sticker lists into a side office and photographed a spreadsheet through the doorway. Names were ranked by debt, family illness, disciplinary vulnerability, and campus influence. Beside Mincio's name was a note recommending placement in a Kong pharmaceutical subsidiary known for 12-hour laboratory shifts. I wanted to tear the sheet from the wall. Instead, I returned to the ballroom and watched Mincio smile because she believed opportunity had finally noticed her. That was the cruelest part. The conspiracy did not simply punish students. It converted hope into leverage. Hannah saw my expression and knew I had found something. She did not ask me to explain until we were outside. When I showed the photo, Hannah's anger became frighteningly quiet. Junho enlarged the spreadsheet and found an embedded code matching the scholarship scoring portal. The 3 systems were connected. Harmony scores identified obedient students, debt profiles measured desperation, and corporate placements converted both into cheap labor. The college's most generous family had built a recruitment farm out of financial aid. The system updated my mission. Expose the mechanism without sacrificing victims. Identify controlling authority. Preserve genuine relationships. I stared at the final condition. Even while students were being exploited, the protocol still cared whether my friendships were real. Grandmother had anticipated that saving people could become another way to purchase loyalty. I was not allowed to reveal my identity and turn gratitude into proof. Hannah demanded we publish immediately. Junho warned that one photograph could be dismissed as a training document. Mincio wanted to confront the scholarship office because students were already accepting placements. I argued for more evidence. They looked at me, the newest and poorest member of the group, and asked why I sounded like a corporate lawyer. I said fear had taught me to respect paper trails. That answer was true, just incomplete. My childhood had been filled with lawsuits disguised as family conversations. I knew accusations without documents became weapons for the richer side. Hannah reluctantly agreed to wait 1 week. We divided the investigation. Junho would trace the scoring system. Hannah would interview former interns. Mincio would collect scholarship contracts, and I would map the companies receiving students. The system gave me temporary access to public corporate registries, but no secret family databases. I spent nights in the computer lab following shell companies through addresses, directors, and consulting agreements. The trail always returned to Myrie Crown Holdings, the Kong family's private investment arm. Principal Park's brother sat on one subsidiary board. 3 trustees owned shares through relatives. Junho noticed I worked too quickly. He asked how a logistics worker's son understood offshore ownership. I joked that poor people studied rich people because rich people kept moving the rent. He laughed, but his eyes remained curious. The system warned identity suspicion rising. I could lie more convincingly or trust him with part of the truth. Revealing my billionaire status would fail the mission instantly. I told him my grandmother had taught me business before she died and left me access to research tools. That was honest enough to stop the warning. Junho accepted it because grief was a boundary he respected. Then he showed me what he had found. The Harmony score was not only used for scholarships. It controlled dorm assignments, campus jobs, internship recommendations, and access to complaint forms. Students with low scores became invisible by design. Their emails went unanswered, work hours vanished, and disciplinary reports accumulated. The portal called it friction management. Junho called it making poor people too tired to resist. I realized the system was more dangerous than stolen money. It taught students that every hardship was personal failure, while algorithms quietly closed doors around them. Mincio brought us a contract signed by her friend Lee Dae-hoon before he disappeared from campus. The agreement placed him in an unpaid research internship with penalties for leaving early. His scholarship had paid his tuition directly, but the foundation demanded repayment if he withdrew from the placement. He had effectively been trapped by money advertised as help. Hannah found Dae-hoon working nights at a warehouse outside Seoul. He had left the internship after being ordered to falsify safety records. The foundation demanded 30 million won, his housing was canceled, and his parents received collection calls. He refused an interview because he believed speaking would make things worse. Hannah did not pressure him. She returned with his written permission to use the contract, but not his name. That restraint made my system raise her sincerity probability. She cared more about the victim than the story, which was rare even among people calling themselves principled. Trust candidate 2, 71%. Junho's probability rose when he deleted a copy of Dae-hoon's address from our shared folder without being asked. Mincio's rose when she refused the gold sticker internship despite needing the money. Mine did not rise. The protocol displayed self-concealment affecting mutual trust. I could receive honesty while offering a carefully edited version of myself. That was the trap inside my plan. I wanted friends who cared about me without money, but I had not given them the choice to care about the real me. I was asking for truth while hiding the largest fact in the room. Before I could decide what that meant, Taejun targeted Junho. Campus security searched our dorm and claimed they had detected unauthorized access to scholarship servers from his account. They found a flash drive inside his drawer containing copied student records. Junho stared at it like it was a snake. He had never seen it before. I recognized the drive casing from the networking reception staff office. Security suspended Junho's campus job and confiscated his laptop. Taejun arrived as student council vice president, pretending concern. He suggested poor students sometimes made reckless choices when money became tight. I wanted to reveal enough power to erase him from the university before lunch. The protocol locked my emergency funds because Junho was not in physical danger. Reputation and employment did not qualify. Junho looked at me while security led him away, not accusing, just afraid. I promised we would prove it. Taejun asked whether I planned to pay for a lawyer with cafeteria coupons. Mincio stepped between us and told him his family's name did not make planted evidence cleaner. Taejun smiled and warned her that loyalty to criminals would affect her harmony score. Hannah recorded the threat. Taejun noticed, and ordered a guard to seize her phone under privacy rules. She transferred the video to her necklace drive before handing it over. The system marked coordinated retaliation confirmed. It also opened a narrow emergency option, legal defense assistance available if provided anonymously and without coercive conditions. Grandmother had left loopholes for justice, not comfort. I activated the defense fund through a public interest law clinic my family supported without my name attached. By evening, Junho had a lawyer demanding forensic preservation of the flash drive, access logs, and security footage. Principal Park suddenly announced an internal review instead of immediate expulsion. Taejin's expression changed when he realized someone outside the college had entered the fight. Junho returned to the dorm exhausted and suspicious. He asked who had arranged the lawyer. I said Hannah had contacted an advocacy group. Hannah looked at me, but did not expose the lie. Later, she cornered me near the stairwell and asked how I knew the clinic would respond so fast. I told her I had sent an urgent message. She said urgent messages from poor freshmen usually became unread messages. I expected her to demand answers. Instead, she said she would wait until I trusted her enough to stop insulting her intelligence. That hurt more than accusation. The system agreed. Mutual trust imbalance detected. Candidate relationship unstable. I had come to find true friends, but I was already teaching them that friendship with me required accepting unexplained miracles. The forensic report cleared Junho within 3 days. The flash drive had been accessed from a student council office computer, and the dorm hallway camera showed a campaign volunteer entering our room during fire inspection. Principal Park suspended the volunteer but called the incident individual misconduct. Taejun publicly praised the college for correcting an unfortunate misunderstanding. Nobody asked who had ordered it. Junho wanted to celebrate with fried chicken, but our combined budget could only afford convenience store kimbap. I almost used hidden funds for one meal. The system rejected the request with humiliating speed. Mincio brought leftover cafeteria chicken marked for disposal. Hannah supplied drinks, and we ate on the dorm floor, while Junho renamed the cactus attorney Sprout. That night felt more luxurious than every yacht dinner I remembered. Nobody asked what I could provide. Junho complained about the lawyer's tie, Hannah mocked my terrible chopstick grip, and Mincio fell asleep against the wall while holding a contract she had been reviewing. The system raised all 3 trust probabilities, then warned me again. Authenticity cannot be measured forever through concealment. Our investigation continued beneath the appearance of ordinary student life. We attended lectures, worked shifts, argued over assignments, and secretly assembled evidence of a labor pipeline hidden inside scholarship administration. Hannah discovered that the foundation received government tax benefits for each student supported. Kong subsidiaries then charged consulting fees to train those same students while receiving their unpaid work. The scheme made money 3 times: tax relief, administrative fees, and cheap labor. Students blamed themselves when they collapsed. Principal Park signed annual reports certifying the program's educational value. Professor M's name appeared on one advisory committee, but her signature looked copied. I did not know whether she was involved or another person being used. I tested her carefully after class by asking how students could appeal internship placement. Professor M closed the door before answering. She said the official process was useless because appeals were routed to the foundation. Then she gave me the name of a former assistant dean who had resigned after objecting to the scoring system. The system marked her as a potential protected witness. The assistant dean, Co Myao, lived in Incheon and refused to meet on campus. She agreed to speak only after Hannah promised no recording. Myao explained that the Kong family had created the system after a student protest embarrassed them 5 years earlier. Harmony scores began as donor relations data, then expanded into a silent discipline network. Principal Park opposed it at first, but signed after the Kong family threatened to bankrupt the college. That did not make him innocent. It made him useful. Myong said Park had spent years telling himself compliance protected the university. Each compromise made the next one easier. By the time students were trapped in exploitative placements, he had become the respectable face of a machine he claimed to fear. She gave us copies of meeting minutes and one encrypted backup drive. The drive required a key held by the foundation's internal server. Junho could retrieve it only by entering the administration network, which would be illegal without authorization. Hannah suggested finding a whistleblower inside the foundation. Mincio remembered that Kang Taejin's older sister, Kang So-hee, worked as program director and rarely appeared at public events. Rumors said she had returned from overseas after fighting with her father. Approaching So-hee felt like walking into a tiger enclosure with a handwritten invitation. She agreed to meet after Hannah sent one page from Myung's minutes. We found her in a hospital cafe, not a luxury hotel. She wore no family pin and looked more tired than rich. Her first question was whether Mincio had accepted the pharmaceutical internship. When Mincio said no, So-hee looked relieved. She admitted the company had been placing scholarship students in labs with unsafe exposure levels. She had tried to stop it, but her father, Chairman Kang Myung-sik, removed her authority and threatened her younger brother's future. Taejun believed the placements were prestigious. He did not know the full system, only enough to enforce obedience and enjoy the power it gave him. Hannah asked why So-hee had stayed silent. So-hee answered that fear became comfortable when served in a family office. She had collected documents but never released them because doing so would destroy employees, students, and her mother's medical foundation along with her father. She wanted a controlled reform. Mincio told her controlled reform was what powerful people called delay when someone else was being harmed. So-hee accepted the insult. She gave us the server key but imposed one condition. We had to separate evidence of criminal conduct from legitimate companies before publishing. Thousands of workers should not lose jobs because one family used corporate structures as weapons. I agreed immediately. Hannah studied me again, noticing how naturally I spoke about corporate containment. The encrypted drive opened into years of internal records. Junho nearly dropped his laptop. There were scholarship rankings, donor instructions, wage violations, medical reports from unsafe internships, and messages ordering administrators to lower harmony scores after student complaints. One folder was labeled Project Blank Slate. Inside were plans to replace independent student organizations with foundation-approved leadership programs. The final file was worse. Chairman Kang planned to acquire the college's remaining debt through Myri Crown Holdings. Once the college defaulted, his family would control the land, curriculum, research patents, and student data. The scholarship conspiracy was not merely profitable. It was weakening Myung-seong deliberately so the Kang family could take it without public resistance. The system updated the institutional anomaly to active hostile capture. It also displayed a financial comparison that almost made me laugh. My locked personal trust exceeded Principal Park's entire reported wealth by more than 40 times. My family group could buy Myri Crown's college debt in one transaction. The title the campus would later give me, richer than the principal, was technically true before I arrived. But purchasing the debt would end the poverty test and reveal everything. More importantly, it would replace Kang control with Han control. Grandmother's protocol blocked the option unless students and staff requested independent intervention. I could not save the college by turning it into another rich family's possession. I needed the people inside Myung-seong to choose what happened next. We planned a slow release. Hannah would publish an article explaining harmony scores without naming vulnerable students. Junho would create a tool allowing students to request their data. Mincio would organize a confidential meeting of scholarship recipients. So he would preserve corporate records before her father could delete them. I would trace the college debt and identify investors willing to support a transparent restructuring. That last task was impossible under my fake identity. Banks ignored poor freshmen, and legitimate investors would not negotiate with an anonymous system account. I asked the protocol for a method. It offered a restricted proxy, one conversation with Secretary Kim Yerin, monitored and limited to public interest finance. I had not heard her voice since entering campus. Yerin answered by asking whether I had finally learned instant noodles were not a balanced diet. I told her people were being exploited and outlined the debt structure. Her tone changed immediately. She said Hanul Vertex could form a neutral rescue consortium, but only if the request came from faculty, workers, and students rather than me. She also warned that Chairman Kang had business allies inside my father's board. The conspiracy had reached beyond college. Some Vertex directors favored Kang's acquisition because it would provide research access and student data. If my identity emerged too early, they could portray my intervention as a private heir manipulating education for family competition. Yerin told me to gather consent before money. Grandmother's voice seemed to speak through every rule. Hannah's first article was scheduled for Monday. On Sunday night, the student paper office flooded after a pipe burst directly above its server cabinet. Facilities called it bad luck. Hannah's physical drive survived, but the editor received a legal threat accusing the paper of stealing confidential scholarship information. He canceled publication and suspended Hannah for risking the organization. Hannah stood outside the locked office holding her press badge like something dead. I expected anger. She looked embarrassed instead, as if failing to publish meant she had failed every student who trusted her. I told her one blocked article did not erase the truth. She asked whether I really believed that or had enough money somewhere to make consequences feel temporary. The question landed too close. I almost confessed everything. Then Taejun appeared with security officers and a disciplinary notice for unauthorized possession of foundation data. So he had vanished from contact. Junho's account was disabled again. Mincio received notice that her scholarship was under emergency review. The Kong family had stopped using warnings. They were closing every door at once. Taejun offered us a private solution. If Hannah surrendered the drives, Junho signed a misconduct admission, and Mincio accepted the internship, all disciplinary action would disappear. He looked at me last and said I could remain enrolled if I stopped pretending poverty made me morally important. His confidence told me he still believed I was nobody. I refused before the others could speak. Taejun asked what authority I had. I said none, which was exactly why his offer was disgusting. He was demanding obedience from people whose futures his family had already purchased. Security removed us from the building. Students watched from the courtyard, filming the poor group being escorted out while Taejun's campaign banners promised fairness. The system marked a crisis threshold. 3 trust candidates faced coordinated institutional harm because of actions linked to me. Emergency disclosure option available. Reveal identity to candidates only. Poverty test continues if they independently choose confidentiality. I stared at the message. Grandmother had built a door for the moment secrecy became another form of betrayal. I asked Junho, Hannah, and Mincio to meet in an abandoned seminar room. My hands shook more than they had during any shareholder presentation. I told them my father did not work in ordinary logistics. My grandmother had not left only research tools, and the lawyer had arrived because I had access to a family trust. Hannah crossed her arms and waited for the part one was still avoiding. I said my full name, Han Seojun of Hanul Vertex Group. Junho laughed because he thought I was making a terrible joke. Mincio did not. Her face emptied as she remembered every meal she had helped me afford. Hannah searched my name and placed her phone on the table. My childhood photos, family holdings, and succession rumors filled the screen between us. Nobody spoke for a long time. Junho finally asked whether the squeaky dorm bed was part of Billionaire research. Hannah asked how many times I had lied. Mincio asked whether I had ever actually needed the dumpling. That question hurt most. I said yes, because the system budget was real, but the person accepting it had hidden an entire life from her. Mincio stood and left. Junho followed after telling me not to touch his cactus. Hannah remained long enough to say the evidence still mattered, but friendship was not another investigation where I could reveal facts when strategically useful. She took the drives and walked out. The protocol displayed trust collapse across all 3 candidates. My hidden wealth remained locked. For the first time, I considered abandoning the test. I could call Yaren, reveal myself publicly, buy the college debt, crush the Kong family, restore every scholarship, and return to a life where betrayal came with contracts. It would solve the conspiracy faster. It would also prove my father right. Relationships were inefficient risks. Grandmother's recorded message appeared on the system screen. She said secrecy protected truth only until it began controlling another person's choices. After that, secrecy became power. She did not tell me what to do. She never made difficult decisions comfortable. The message ended with one sentence. A friend is not someone who passes your test. A friend is someone allowed to judge the real you. I wrote 3 apologies without explanations. To Junho, I admitted I had used his ordinary kindness as evidence in an inheritance trial. To Hannah, I admitted I had expected transparency while practicing concealment. To Mincio, I admitted the dumpling mattered because she had given it without knowing what I could return. I did not ask any of them to forgive me. The Kong family announced our suspensions the next morning. Their statement called us participants in a coordinated cyber attack funded by an unidentified corporate rival. That phrase meant they had discovered a larger force behind the legal clinic, but not my identity. Principal Park scheduled a public conduct hearing during Taejun's campaign rally, turning our punishment into a warning for everyone else. I attended alone because the others had not answered me. Taejun stood on the auditorium stage and presented selected logs implying Junho stole data, Hana blackmailed staff, Minseo violated scholarship conduct, and I recruited them. Principal Park asked whether I admitted organizing the group. I said yes. The audience shifted. Taejun smiled, believing I had surrendered. Then I asked permission to explain what we had organized. Park refused, saying confidential foundation matters were outside the hearing. I asked whether student discipline could rely on evidence students were forbidden to challenge. Professor M stood in the faculty section and said no. One voice became 3, then 10. Students who had received low harmony scores began raising their hands. Minseo entered through the side doors carrying a stack of scholarship contracts. Junho followed with a projector. Hana walked behind them wearing no press badge but holding every backup drive. They had not forgiven me. They had simply decided the truth did not belong to my mistakes. The system marked independent return without financial incentive. Junho displayed the scoring portal and showed how student council accounts altered records. Hana played Taejun's recorded threat. Minseo read clauses tying aid to unpaid labor. Professor M submitted her copied signature as evidence of document fraud. The auditorium stopped being a rally and became a witness room. Taejun ordered staff to cut the projector. The screens went dark, but hundreds of student phones lit up. Junho had built the data request tool before his account was disabled and scheduled it to launch during the hearing. Students entered their numbers and received copies of Harmony Score records from the preserved archive. Private insults became public evidence. Disruptive, insufficient gratitude, family debt useful, resistant personality, politically risky. The room erupted. Taejun shouted that the records were fabricated. Then a message appeared on every screen from Kang So-hee. She had not vanished willingly. Her father had confined her to a family residence and seized her devices, but she had scheduled a release if she missed 2 check-ins. Her statement authenticated the server archive and accused Myri Crown Holdings of unlawful data use. Principal Park tried to adjourn the hearing. The exits were blocked, not by security, but by cafeteria workers, maintenance staff, and teaching assistants who had gathered after Minseo contacted them. They did not threaten anyone. They simply demanded the trustees hear wage and scholarship complaints before leaving. For years, institutional harmony had meant silence. That day, harmony finally became noise. Chairman Kang arrived before the police. He walked onto the stage with the calm of a man used to purchasing outcomes. He called the scandal a misunderstanding caused by emotional students and manipulated files. Then his eyes found me. Recognition flickered. He had attended Vertex dinners when I was younger. My dusty shoes could not hide my face forever. Kang asked Principal Park to clear the room. I stepped forward and used the Emergency Disclosure Authority. My cracked phone connected to the auditorium system and displayed a verification seal from Hanul Vertex family office. The audience went silent as my legal identity appeared. Han Seo-jun, controlling beneficiary of the Manhwa Trust, provisional voting heir of Hanul Vertex Group. Taejun's face changed first. He had spent weeks mocking someone whose locked personal trust exceeded his principal's fortune many times over. Students began whispering that the poor freshman was richer than the principal, richer than the trustees, possibly richer than the Kang family. I felt no triumph. Wealth had entered the room, and suddenly everyone listened. That was exactly the problem. Chairman Kang recovered quickly. He accused my family of staging the investigation to seize Myung-seong. I said Hanul Vertex would not purchase or control the college. Instead, the Manhwa Trust had prepared a rescue consortium requiring shared governance by students, faculty, and workers. The proposal would buy the Kang-held debt only if the university community approved transparent restructuring. Principal Park looked at me like a drowning man seeing a rope attached to a courtroom. The consortium would save the college but expose every compromised decision he had signed. Chairman Kang warned him that cooperation would destroy his career. Park stared at the students reading their hidden scores and finally admitted the system existed. His confession broke the room. Park explained that the Kong family had threatened to withdraw funding during a financial crisis 5 years earlier. He approved donor scoring as a temporary measure, then allowed it to spread. He had told himself protecting the college justified sacrificing a few students. The few became hundreds because nobody powerful was ever included in the sacrifice. Chairman Kong ordered his lawyers to stop Park. Hannah streamed the confession through an independent media account. Junho mirrored it across student servers. Mincio stood beside scholarship recipients who were crying, furious, or both. I realized the conspiracy was already larger than any single document. People had begun recognizing their private suffering as a shared design. Police investigators entered with warrants based on Sohee's scheduled evidence and the legal clinic's filings. Chairman Kong was not arrested immediately, but his devices were seized. Taejun tried to leave through the backstage corridor. A group of students blocked him and demanded he explain their harmony scores. He looked at me, expecting protection or revenge. I told them to let him pass. Anger flashed across the crowd. Then I said Taejun would face a formal hearing with evidence, representation, and consequences, the rights his family had denied others. He would not be beaten, humiliated, or trapped in a room because we were angry. Justice did not become fair by choosing a more popular target. Taejun mistook restraint for mercy. He whispered that I needed his family's cooperation if I wanted the college stable. I told him stability had been their favorite word for fear. He was suspended from student council pending investigation. His campaign banners came down before sunset. Nobody asked me for permission. That mattered. The Common Ground Protocol declared the poverty phase complete, but withheld final inheritance review. Financial restraint passed. Institutional anomaly exposed. Genuine relationship requirement unresolved. I had revealed my identity under emergency rules, yet Junho, Hannah, and Mincio had not chosen whether our friendship survived. No amount of public victory could answer that for them. The campus transformed overnight. Students who had ignored me now sent hundreds of messages. Some apologized for insults I barely remembered. Others offered friendship with suspicious speed. Clubs invited me to honorary positions. A luxury restaurant delivered food to the dorm. I rejected everything and returned to the cafeteria with the same limited meal card. The cashier stared at my account because my name now appeared beside headlines. Mincio was not working. Her supervisor said she had taken leave to visit her mother. I wanted to send medical support immediately, but the system blocked personal intervention without her consent. Billionaire power felt useless when the person mattered more than the solution. Junho returned to the dorm that night and found 3 new mattresses delivered by companies seeking favor. He made me carry them back to the lobby. Then he handed me instant noodles and said I could stay until the semester ended because the housing contract had both our names. He clarified that this was tenancy, not forgiveness. I accepted the distinction. He asked whether I had ever laughed at his jokes because a system was measuring him. I said the system recorded reactions but could not manufacture them. He asked whether Attorney Sprout had been under surveillance. I said only when the cactus witnessed financial crimes. Junho almost smiled, then told me trust would return slower than jokes. Hannah met me in the library and demanded full access to every document connecting my family to Myeongseong. She would not publish private family information unrelated to the case, but she refused to become a friendly reporter protecting my image. I gave her the access Ki Yeren had prepared. If friendship required her to stop investigating me, it was not friendship. She found uncomfortable facts. Hanul Vertex subsidiaries had sponsored recruitment systems similar to Kang's in other universities, though without harmony scores. My father's board had purchased anonymized student data through Myri Crown. The conspiracy had benefited people inside my own empire. Chairman Kong was not an external villain. He was a partner in a culture my family tolerated. Hannah expected me to suppress the discovery. I authorized publication instead and asked Yeren to preserve board records. The system warned that disclosure could reduce my inheritance value by billions. I approved it. Wealth that depended on hiding exploitation was already a liability. Accountants simply had not labeled it correctly. My father arrived on campus furious. He entered the dorm without security and stared at the squeaky bed as if poverty were contagious. He said grandmother's test had turned me into an activist before I learned to be chairman. I told him his board had purchased data from vulnerable students. He called it standard market research. Junho sat at his desk, pretending not to listen while recording everything in memory. I asked father whether standard practice became moral through repetition. He accused me of risking thousands of jobs for campus friendships. I replied that companies always counted employees when executives needed shields. If jobs mattered, we would reform the business without protecting directors who profited. Father warned that the board could challenge my succession. The Common Ground Protocol had been designed as proof of judgment, not a weapon against the group itself. I said judgment that stopped at the family gate was branding. He left after telling me grandmother had made me soft. Junho waited until the door closed and said my family arguments had better production value than television. Hannah published the Vertex connection alongside the Kong evidence. Public opinion became less flattering. Some accused me of exposing a conspiracy only after my family profited. Others said I had staged the poverty test as reputation repair. Those criticisms hurt because parts were reasonable. I had entered campus searching for true friends, not justice. I noticed the machine only after it touched people near me. At a press conference, I admitted exactly that. I said I had been blind because wealth allowed me to treat injustice as a theory until friends gave it names and faces. I did not ask praise for acting late. I announced an independent review of every Vertex education partnership and placed my provisional voting rights into temporary oversight until the review ended. My father called it surrender. Investors called it instability. Students called it a start. The system recorded voluntary reduction of personal control. Grandmother had always distrusted heirs who solved corruption by becoming the only honest authority. If the reform depended on my permanent virtue, it was only another private kingdom. Mincio finally returned to campus after 3 days. Her mother had been admitted for treatment, and a hospital social worker had suddenly found a charitable fund covering part of the cost. Mincio asked whether I arranged it. I had not. So he had used her own salary and a public patient fund she had quietly supported for years. That distinction softened something in Mincio. She met So-hee and learned the Kong daughter had been trying, imperfectly and secretly, to resist her family. Mincio still criticized her silence. So-hee accepted it and offered to testify about the pharmaceutical placements. The conspiracy had not produced simple heroes and villains. It had produced people choosing at different speeds under unequal fear. Mincio agreed to speak with me beside the cafeteria loading dock, where nobody important ever visited. She said the poverty disguise itself did not anger her most. What hurt was realizing I could leave the struggle whenever it became uncomfortable. She had believed we were trapped together. I had been visiting the cage. I told her the system made the budget real, but could not make our risks equal. She could lose her scholarship, housing, and mother's treatment. I could lose an inheritance and still remain safe. Pretending otherwise had allowed me to feel noble without carrying her full fear. I apologized without asking her to make the apology successful. Mincio said she did not know whether we could return to what we were. I said we should not. What we had was built on missing truth. If anything survived, it needed to become different. She handed me a cracked dumpling from the kitchen and said this one was not charity. It was evidence that she had not decided to hate me permanently. The system raised her trust probability, but I closed the display. Measuring her reaction now felt invasive. I disabled friendship scoring for all 3 candidates. The protocol warned that doing so removed predictive guidance and could cause mission failure. I accepted. Friendship could not become genuine while I watched probabilities like stock prices. That choice changed the system. Instead of rating people, it began rating my use of power, concealment, coercion, consent, dependency, and structural impact. Grandmother had expected me to outgrow the first test. She had designed the scoring system as training wheels, then waited to see whether I would remove them before riding into someone else. The rescue consortium required a campus referendum. Chairman Kang's allies launched a fear campaign claiming student and worker governance would bankrupt Myeongseong. Donors threatened withdrawal. Parents received messages warning that degrees would lose value. Anonymous accounts said I wanted to turn an elite university into a political experiment. Taejun returned to campus under temporary restrictions and surprised everyone by opposing his father's campaign. He admitted he had enforced harmony scores, but claimed he never knew about labor exploitation. Students called that convenient ignorance. He asked to testify anyway. Hannah agreed to interview him under conditions he could not control. During the interview, Taejun confessed that power had made curiosity unnecessary. Whenever someone disappeared from a program, he assumed they had failed. Whenever his father punished a critic, he assumed the critic was dangerous. He had not known because knowing would have required giving up comfort. That was not innocence. It was a decision repeated until it looked natural. His testimony exposed direct orders from Chairman Kang to manipulate student council accounts and target organizers. Taejun also revealed Principal Park had secretly delayed several harsher expulsions, proving the principal was neither pure accomplice nor brave resistor. His small acts of protection had saved individuals while allowing the larger machine to survive. Compromise had made him both guilty and useful. The referendum debates became the first honest public arguments Myeong-seong had held in years. Faculty feared donor collapse. Workers demanded voting seats. Students argued over whether scholarship recipients should control funds they benefited from. I refused to lead every discussion. My proposal received criticism I could not dismiss with money, and that was healthier than applause. Junho designed a public budget simulator showing how the college could survive without Kang's subsidies by cutting vanity projects, renegotiating debt, and ending shell company fees. The principal's ceremonial residence alone cost more than 200 student meal plans. Park offered to vacate it before anyone demanded he do so. Hannah called that an excellent first step toward discovering apartments. Mincio organized scholarship students into a council that refused to endorse the consortium until aid protections became legally binding. She did not trust my promise, and she was right not to. The final agreement placed scholarship reserves beyond donor control, guaranteed appeals, banned behavioral scoring, and gave students access to every data profile held about them. Workers demanded similar protections. Cafeteria staff, cleaners, security guards, and temporary technicians would elect representatives to the governing board. Some professors objected that employees lacked expertise. Junho's supervisor replied that expertise had not prevented educated trustees from hiding fraud. The room applauded before I could. Hanul Vertex offered financing at below-market rates, but only after an independent valuation. I recused myself from negotiations. Chairman Kang accused me of hiding control behind committees. I released every consortium term publicly, including the clauses limiting Han family voting power. Transparency did not make suspicion disappear, but it gave suspicion something testable. The referendum passed with 68% support. The result did not feel like my victory. Students had rewritten sections I preferred, workers had rejected my first timeline, and faculty had limited corporate influence more aggressively than Yeren recommended. The proposal survived by becoming less mine. Grandmother would have approved. Myri Crown attempted to trigger default before the consortium could close. They demanded immediate payment on a debt clause Principal Park had signed years earlier. The amount exceeded the college's reserves. For the first time, the Common Ground Protocol unlocked my full emergency liquidity. The system compared my available funds with Park's net worth and displayed a ridiculous ratio. I could personally cover the payment without noticing the loss. That was the moment headlines later simplified into secret system makes poor student richer than the principal. The truth was less glamorous. Money gave me the ability to act, but the referendum gave me permission. I authorized a bridge loan through the consortium, not a personal purchase, and every term appeared on the public portal. Chairman Kang's default strategy failed. His lenders withdrew after seeing the criminal evidence and transparent refinancing plan. Myri Crown's share price fell, but the consortium created protections for ordinary employees and suppliers. We targeted control, not livelihoods. My father reluctantly admitted the containment strategy was competent, which in our family counted as an emotional embrace. The board investigation at Hanul Vertex removed 2 directors who had purchased student data and censured 3 executives. Father survived the vote, but lost control of education partnerships. He called me afterward and said leadership sometimes required exposing your own side. I asked whether grandmother had finally started haunting him. He hung up. Principal Park resigned before the new governance board formed. Students demanded prosecution. Investigators were still reviewing his role. He asked to address the campus once. In his speech, he did not blame pressure or good intentions. He said he had confused keeping Myeong-seong open with keeping it worthy of opening. Then he submitted every private record he had preserved. His cooperation reduced some consequences, but did not erase them. He lost his position, residence, board benefits, and professional standing. The new board appointed Professor Im as interim principal because she had opposed the scoring system and agreed to share authority. Her first act was to remove the executive parking spaces nearest the library and turn them into accessibility zones. Chairman Kong was charged with financial misconduct, unlawful data use, coercion, and obstruction. So he testified despite losing her family position. Her mother's foundation separated from Myri Crown and entered independent oversight. Taejun faced university discipline, community restitution, and loss of student office. He did not ask me to forgive him. Instead, Taejun asked whether he could join the team reviewing student data deletion. Junho said putting the former abuser near the system sounded insane. Mincio suggested allowing him only under supervision and no decision-making power. Hannah wanted his knowledge of hidden accounts. I stayed out of the vote. The affected students decided the terms. They approved limited participation. Taejun spent weeks helping identify shadow profiles while students watched every action. Some never spoke to him. Others asked questions he could not answer without shame. Consequence became work rather than one dramatic apology. He learned that begging forgiveness was easier than becoming useful to people who did not owe it. The student paper reopened under an independent charter. Hannah became editor after insisting elections include staff and freelance contributors. Her first front page did not show my face. It showed a screenshot of the deleted harmony score field and a list of reforms still unfinished. She said heroes were dangerous formatting choices. Junho received his campus job back with compensation, then quit because the new student technology cooperative offered him better pay and voting rights. He moved attorney Sprout to the office and gave the cactus an employee badge. When I offered investment, he required the same terms as any other funder and reduced my board seat to observer status. Mincio rejected every corporate internship connected to the old system. She helped create a paid placement network where students could leave unsafe jobs without losing scholarships. Her mother's treatment stabilized through public medical support, not my private generosity. That mattered to her, and eventually it mattered to me more than being the person who solved it. My inheritance review arrived near the end of the semester. The system confirmed financial discipline, ethical intervention, and institutional repair. The genuine relationship requirement remained open because I had disabled scoring. A final message asked me to name 3 true friends and accept that the system could not verify the answer. I stared at the blank fields for a long time. Writing their names felt like claiming something they had not offered. So I left the fields empty and submitted a statement. Friendship was not an asset I could certify alone. If the trust required proof, the trust could remain locked. I would rather lose money than turn people into evidence again. The system went silent. Yaren called an hour later and told me the full inheritance had transferred. Grandmother's final condition was not finding 3 friends. It was refusing to define friendship as something I owned. She had expected the system to fail at measuring the most important result. I laughed and cried in the dorm hallway, while Junho complained that billionaires were too noisy. I told him the test was over and the trust had unlocked. He asked whether that meant I would move into a penthouse. I said the dorm contract lasted another month. He said good, because I still owed him for 3 noodle cups and emotional damages. Then he handed me a new phone screen protector. It was the closest thing to forgiveness he had offered. Hannah invited me to the paper office and placed a disclosure form in front of me. It stated that any future information given as a friend could still be investigated if it affected public interest. I signed without negotiating. She stamped it, called me an unreliable source, and asked whether I wanted coffee. I said yes. Friendship with Hannah apparently came with editorial policy. Mincio made me wait longer. We studied together, attended governance meetings, and argued about whether corporate money could ever enter education without changing it. She trusted my actions before trusting my intentions. I learned not to demand faster healing because my apology felt sincere. Damage followed the injured person's calendar, not the guilty person's impatience. One evening after closing the cafeteria, she asked why I had really entered Myeongseong. I said I wanted friends who did not care about my wealth. She said that goals still centered wealth, just negatively. I had treated poverty like a costume and friendship like proof I could escape my surname. Maybe I needed people who knew the money and still challenged the person holding it. I asked whether she was one of those people. Mincio said she was considering the position, but the benefits package looked terrible. Then she gave me a dumpling that was not cracked, not leftover, and not free. I paid the exact cafeteria price. The ordinary transaction felt more intimate than any expensive gift I had received. Campus gossip decided we were dating before either of us did. Mincio responded by assigning me extra work at the scholarship council. I told her exploitation had supposedly ended. She said accountability was not exploitation when the billionaire volunteered. Junho printed a badge for me reading unpaid emotional intern. Hannah threatened to publish it. My father visited the new governing board and sat in a chair identical to everyone else's. Nobody offered him the center seat. He looked uncomfortable, which improved my mood. He proposed a research partnership with full public terms and student data protections. The board rejected 2 clauses and accepted the rest. Father survived the experience without purchasing the building. After the meeting, he asked whether my friends understood the risks of standing beside our family. I said they understood risk better than we did because our family usually caused it. He almost smiled. Then he admitted grandmother had once tested him too, but he had withdrawn after 2 weeks because living without staff was inefficient. That explained more than either of us wanted. So he began rebuilding her life outside the Kong group. She worked with regulators and the new placement network, but students did not immediately trust her. She accepted supervision and refused a leadership title. Mincio told her repentance without control was a useful beginning. So he said Mincio had a gift for making encouragement sound painful. Taejun changed more slowly. Some days he worked honestly. Other days resentment returned when former admirers ignored him. He once accused me of enjoying moral superiority. I told him I did sometimes, and that was why decisions about his consequences did not belong to me. Admitting my worst impulses denied him the satisfaction of exposing them. The trial against Chairman Kong revealed how many institutions had copied Myung Seong's scoring model. Universities, corporations, and scholarship foundations had purchased versions under different names. The conspiracy was not one family's invention. It was a market built around predicting who could be pressured without public cost. Our campus had been a laboratory. Hannah formed a national reporting collaboration. Junho released an open-source tool helping students request algorithmic profiles. Mincio organized legal clinics for scholarship contracts. I funded infrastructure through an independent foundation where beneficiaries held majority voting power. Every project moved farther from my personal control and became stronger for it. Critics still called the reforms my billionaire hobby. Sometimes that accusation made me angry. Then Mincio reminded me that visibility followed money unfairly. Instead of arguing for credit, I redirected interviews towards students and workers. The less the story depended on my face, the harder it became for enemies to dismiss the movement as one heir's rebellion. Myung Seong's finances remained difficult. Cutting corruption did not create instant abundance. Departments lost vanity budgets, construction projects stopped, and some donors left. Students who expected a magical billionaire rescue complained. I could have filled every gap personally, but the board required sustainable funding and public approval. Money was powerful, not infinite when dignity set the rules. We held the first open budget assembly in the old donor ballroom. Cafeteria workers debated laboratory equipment with professors. Students questioned executive salaries. Alumni proposed grants without naming rights. The meeting lasted 6 exhausting hours and ended with no perfect answer. I loved it. Democracy was inefficient because human beings were not spreadsheet cells. The principal's former residence became a cooperative housing complex for students facing emergency displacement. Park donated part of his pension to the conversion but received no plaque. He was under investigation and had no right to purchase redemption. Still, useful repair mattered even when forgiveness remained uncertain. Dae-hoon, the former intern whose contract began our investigation, returned to campus for the opening. He did not want cameras. He met Mincio privately and agreed to join the placement safety board. When he saw me, he thanked our group, not me. That was the correct shape of gratitude. No single rescuer stood at the center. The criminal case against Chairman Kong ended with convictions for data misuse, coercive contracting, and financial fraud. More serious charges tied to medical harm continued separately. He blamed Sohee, Taejun, Principal Park, and me. He never blamed the system he had built because powerful men often saw systems as weather whenever those systems favored them. Taejun attended the sentencing from the back row. His father did not look at him. Afterward, Taejun asked So-hee whether they still counted as family. She said blood described origin, not obligation. They could build something smaller and more honest after consequences finished doing their work. Taejun cried where nobody from campus could see. I told Minseo I felt sorry for him. She said sympathy did not require rewriting harm. That became one of the most important lessons of the semester. People could be wounded and dangerous, guilty and redeemable, loving and controlling. Simple labels made stories easier, but institutions failed when policy depended on emotional simplicity. The Common Ground protocol remained on my phone after the inheritance transferred, but its commands disappeared. It became a private governance dashboard showing where my money created dependency, silence, or concentrated control. I could disable it completely. I kept it because discomfort was cheaper than corruption. My first unrestricted purchase was not a car or apartment. I bought the dorm's broken washing machines through the student cooperative after residents approved the proposal. Junho accused me of flexing domestic infrastructure. Minseo said clean socks were a responsible use of capital. Hannah investigated whether I had received favorable detergent terms. I did eventually buy new shoes. They were comfortable, ordinary, and impossible to mistake for poverty. Wearing fake damage after the test ended felt insulting. I no longer needed to perform struggle to prove I understood it. Understanding required listening, surrendering control, and remembering that I could always leave situations others could not. At the end of semester festival, student clubs invited me to the main stage. I declined and worked at the cafeteria booth with Minseo. Taejun passed carrying equipment for the data deletion team. Nobody bowed. Nobody begged. He looked tired and useful. That was better than public humiliation, though less satisfying to people who preferred revenge stories. A group of first-year students recognized me and asked whether the rumors were true that my secret system made me richer than the principal. I told them the money had always existed. The system merely prevented me from using it badly for one semester. Junho corrected me from behind the counter. It prevented me from using it badly in several specific ways while leaving room for creative stupidity. The students laughed. One asked whether pretending to be poor had helped me find true friends. I looked at Junho, Hannah, and Minseo. Hannah said not to answer for them. Minseo said I had found people willing to criticize me at no charge. Junho demanded noodles as compensation. I told the students that was probably the closest thing to truth. The national scandal changed scholarship regulations. Schools were required to disclose behavioral scoring, labor conditions, and data sharing agreements. The law was imperfect and full of loopholes, but it gave students tools we had not possessed. Hannah published a guide explaining every weakness before the ink was dry. Reform, she said, required distrust with footnotes. Hanol Vertex completed its education partnership audit and repaid institutions charged through exploitative data contracts. The financial loss was enormous. Father presented it to shareholders as long-term risk correction because apologies frightened markets. I let him use corporate language as long as the money returned and the safeguards remained. Our family board confirmed me as future chairman but delayed succession until I completed university. I agreed under one condition. Beneficiary and worker oversight from the education reforms would expand into other group divisions. The directors hated the idea enough that grandmother would have enjoyed the meeting. Minseo asked whether becoming chairman would turn me into my father. I said probably in small ways I would not notice. She replied that was why I needed people around me who were not financially dependent on agreeing. We discussed contracts, independent careers, and boundaries before discussing romance. It was the least dramatic and most serious conversation of my life. We began dating after she made me apply through what she called the Friendship to Romance Review Committee. Hannah demanded transparency. Junho demanded veto rights over restaurants with tiny portions. Minseo approved one ordinary date at a riverside convenience store. I had eaten in private rooms above Seoul, but nothing had made me more nervous than opening 2 cans of coffee beside her. She asked whether I would have noticed her without the poverty test. I wanted to say yes immediately. Honesty forced me to pause. The old version of me might have seen a scholarship student, admired her courage, and returned to a car before learning her mother's name. The answer hurt, but she preferred it to a beautiful lie. I asked whether she would have liked me if she knew I was wealthy from the beginning. She said maybe, but she would have charged me for the dumpling. Then she admitted my disguise had allowed us to meet without the usual distance, even though the hidden truth later damaged that closeness. Good things could grow from flawed choices without making the flaw disappear. Junho's cooperative won a national contract to build transparent student portals. He refused acquisition offers from major technology firms, including one from Hanul Vertex. I voted against our own proposal after reading the terms. Father asked whether friendship had compromised my judgment. I said the offer was bad. Friendship had merely given the bad offer a person willing to say so. Hannah received an investigative journalism award and used her speech to criticize the sponsor's labor practices. The sponsor looked horrified. She looked delighted. Later, she admitted the award money would help her pay rent. Integrity did not require pretending material needs were shameful. It required refusing to sell silence as gratitude. So he founded a legal support organization for employees trapped by family-controlled companies. She used no-kong money. Taejun joined only after completing his campus restitution and passing an independent review. Their relationship remained difficult, but difficulty was more honest than the polished family photographs they had grown up inside. Professor M became permanent principal under a 5-year term limit. Her salary, expenses, and performance reviews were public. Students still complained about her policies, which she considered proof the new system worked. On Inauguration Day, she invited cafeteria staff and cleaners to sit in the front row. No corporate family name appeared on the stage. The old Harmony Score server was preserved in a digital ethics archive rather than destroyed completely. Survivors controlled access. Researchers could study it only under strict consent rules. Junho said bad systems should leave fossils so future engineers could not pretend the mistakes were unimaginable. Hannah added that powerful people had excellent imaginations when profit was involved. 1 year after I entered Myeongseong, I returned to the front gate wearing my real name and carrying the same faded backpack. The security guard recognized me and nearly bowed. I asked him not to. He apologized for the first day, even though he had only followed assumptions, not direct orders. I told him systems were built from repeated assumptions. Taejun arrived by subway, no sports car, carrying boxes for the ethics archive. Some students still avoided him. Others accepted his work without friendship. He did not ask for a cleaner ending. That was part of his consequence. Redemption could create a future without rewriting the past into something comfortable. The cafeteria had replaced opportunity fees with a student emergency meal program funded through the open budget. Mincio handed me a tray and charged full price. The cracked dumpling tradition had ended because food waste rules improved. She said progress had ruined our symbolism. I said symbolism was overrated when people were eating. Junho placed Attorney Sprout on the table during our anniversary lunch. The cactus had grown 2 centimeters and now wore a paper tie. Hannah brought printed copies of the first article the college had tried to suppress. None of them called themselves my true friends. They did not need to. Their presence answered without giving the system ownership of the answer. I admitted that I had once imagined the poverty test ending with dramatic loyalty. People rejecting money, defending me publicly, and proving they loved the hidden heir. What actually happened was Messier. They left when I betrayed trust, returned for the truth rather than me, and made me earn a different relationship afterward. That was far more genuine than unconditional devotion. Mincio said true friendship was not refusing to leave. Sometimes leaving was the honest response. Junho said true friendship was labeling food in the dorm refrigerator. Hannah said true friendship was not legally recognized, and therefore a terrible governance model. We argued until the cafeteria closed around us. My secret system had made me richer than the principal long before anyone knew. But the wealth mattered most when it stopped being a private answer. It financed legal defense, protected witnesses, and stabilized the college only after people shaped the terms. Money had not exposed the conspiracy alone. Students speaking together had made the evidence impossible to bury. The final system message appeared that night. Grandmother's recorded voice said poverty had never been the test. The test was whether I could experience limited power without romanticizing powerlessness, then regain wealth without treating everyone else's limits as personal failure. She said finding friends was only one part. Learning to be a friend while holding unequal power was the real inheritance. I listened twice and deleted the recording from the active system, keeping only an archive copy. Grandmother's guidance had saved me, but adulthood required making decisions without waiting for a dead person's approval. The dashboard remained a tool, not a conscience. I had people for that now, and unlike software, they enjoyed arguing. When father asked whether the semester had proven his theory wrong, I said partially. Lawyers, employees, and shares still mattered. But loyalty purchased through dependence was fragile, and friendship demanded the freedom to refuse me. He considered that, then asked whether Junho's cooperative would reconsider our acquisition offer. I told him absolutely not. I never returned to pretending I was poor. Poverty was not a costume for rich heirs seeking moral clarity. It was a condition that narrowed choices, amplified mistakes, and made other people's kindness expensive. I kept the old backpack because Junho had repaired the strap, not because damage made me authentic. Memory did not need performance. So when people ask how a hidden billionaire entered college and became richer than the principal, I tell them that part was easy. The money was waiting behind a lock. The difficult part was learning why the lock existed, who had been harmed while families like mine looked away, and why 3 students were brave enough to distrust me until I became someone worth trusting. The system gave me access to wealth. My friends taught me what access was for,